In this episode of the Serial Killer Files, we travel back to the darkest pages of history, to 1800s England. Can a mother send her own children to their deaths without even blinking? If that woman is Mary Ann Cotton, the answer, tragically, is yes. Known as the most horrifying mother in the world, her legend has haunted the world for generations. Mary Ann Robson was born in 1832 in a small village called Low Moorsley in the county of Durham. Like many families of that era, the Robsons lived in deep poverty. Her father worked in the local coal mines. He was an extremely strict, religious, and disciplined man. His harsh ways made life miserable for the family. But when Mary was only 8 years old, she met the cruelty of life far too early. Her father lost his life in a collapse, deep inside that dark mine where he earned their bread. Mary was left with only her mother and her brother. Her mother, she couldn't carry this burden alone and decided to remarry. But Mary hated her stepfather. And truth be told, he didn't care much for her either. Mary's childhood passed with dreams of growing up and building a much better life. At 16, she took her first step toward those dreams. In a village near South Hetton, she began working as a servant in a grand manor. It was here that she first saw luxury, wealth, and power, and she was deeply impressed. The dream of bunding such a life consumed her mind. But local rumors of romance, specifically an affair with a young priest, forced her to leave the manor. In 1851, while working for a tailor, Mary met a miner named William Mowbray in a pub. Soon after, she became pregnant. William was in love. He didn't hesitate to propose marriage. In 1853, they built what seemed like a happy home, but because of William's work, they were forced to move constantly. They had 5 children together, but with the exception of the first, 4 of them died suddenly while still infants in their cradles. In those years, child mortality rates were high, but 4 children dying like that was not a normal statistic. They argued constantly over money. William moved the family to Sunderland, hoping for a better job. Mary gave birth to 3 more children there, and whether it was fate or something else, all 3 died within a short time. Their only surviving child was their firstborn daughter, Isabel. By 1865, William suffered a leg injury. He could no longer work. He was no longer bringing home a paycheck, and Mary was forced to care for him. Soon, in addition to his injury, William began suffering from severe stomach pains. Those pains quickly dragged the young man toward his death. Mary was now a widow. She was free from a man who brought her no money. Just one day after her husband's death, she was at the door of the insurance company to collect the payout. Instead of grief, she was thinking only about the money that would fill her pockets. The insurance money that filled her pockets after her husband's death was merely a starting point for Mary Ann. She needed a new prey and a steady source of income. Even though she lived for a while with her only surviving child, Isabel, the darkness in her heart never rested. She began an affair with a man named Joseph Nattrass, who was already engaged. She even became pregnant with his child, but when Joseph refused to leave his fiancée, Mary was forced to end the relationship. because for her, love was nothing more than a tool, a way to marry a man, murder him, and collect the insurance payout. The child born from this affair soon vanished from this world, succumbing to a so-called fever. The most critical turning point in Mary's life was finding work at a dispensary in Sunderland. This was no sanctuary of healing. It was a death laboratory. Through this job, she gained unrestricted access to the most lethal poisons, like arsenic. The silent, sinister weapon she needed for her dark plans was finally in her hands. While working at the dispensary, she met an engineer named George Ward. Mary cared for George while he was ill, and once she realized the man was wealthy, she successfully made him fall in love with her. In August 1865, they were married. Mary Ann Robson was now Mary Ann Ward. She did not waste a single moment, making sure to take out a heavy life insurance policy on him immediately after the wedding. After being married for only about a year, she began to poison George slowly. As the poor man withered away in excruciating stomach agony, the doctors failed to notice the crime because they did not perform an autopsy. Mary had no intention of slowing down or acknowledging the weight of her sins. In 1866, she answered a newspaper advertisement and entered the home of James Robinson. James was a broken man, recently widowed and left alone to raise 5 children. From the moment she crossed the threshold, Mary unleashed her cold charm to seduce the grieving man. But in her eyes, those 5 children were not lives to be nurtured. They were merely obstacles to be removed. Soon, the youngest child fell victim to those infamous and agonizing stomach pains. As the child breathed his last, Mary wore a mask of fake compassion to console the father. She secured her place in his bed, and soon, a marriage proposal followed. But in 1867, just as the wedding bells were about to ring, news came that her own mother was ill. Mary went to her side, but the woman's recovery was taking far too long for a predator in a hurry. She decided it would be right to speed up the process. Without a heartbeat of hesitation, she poisoned her own mother. With her mother in the ground, Mary returned to the Robinson home, bringing her daughter Isabel into that house of death. The second she returned, her plan to thin the crowd was reactivated. Within just 2 or 3 weeks, 2 more of James's children and Mary's own flesh and blood, Isabel, were left to die in plain sight, consumed by the same lethal stomach agony. James Robinson was grateful for the support this woman showed him, and they finally married. The moment the vows were exchanged, Mary Ann Robinson began pressuring him to take out a life insurance policy. But James showed an unusual resistance. He refused to get the insurance. For the first time, Mary's plan hit a brick wall. Shortly after, their newborn baby died as well. Another soul lost to the shadows of that house. James was becoming exhausted by his wife's constant demands for money, and his anger boiled over when he discovered she had been secretly taking out debits behind his back. In 1869, James Robinson made what was perhaps the smartest decision of his life. He saved his own life without even knowing it, and he kicked Mary out of the house. Mary was back on the streets, but as a predator. It didn't take her long to find her next prey. That same year, she met a woman named Margaret Cotton. Margaret introduced her to her brother, Frederick Cotton. Frederick was quite well off, and Mary, like a cold shadow, slowly wormed her way into this family. And in 1870, she eliminated the obstacle in her way, Margaret. Under the pretext of helping the grieving Frederick with housework, she took over the home. Before long, she was pregnant by him too. By the end of 1870, she'd officially become Mary Ann Cotton. This woman, who officially took the name Mary Ann Cotton after marrying Frederick, soon revealed her true and dark nature. Mary wasted no time in having her new family and husband insured, planning to eliminate them one by one to reach the payout. Around this time, she learned her former lover, Joseph Natras, was still single, and lured him into her home as a lodger under a calculated pretext. Before even a year of marriage had passed, in 1871, Frederick Cotton perished from those infamous and violent stomach pains. With her husband's death, yet another obstacle had been cleared, but she had absolutely no intention of stopping. She began working as a private nurse for a wealthy man named John Quick Manning, and marked her next prey. But there were still complications standing in her way. Frederick's remaining children and her own newborn infant. Mary, without a moment of remorse, sent these children to their graves, poisoning them with arsenic. The next victim was Joseph Natras, who had served his purpose. He too withered away in excruciating agony. To Mary John Quick Manning, only one obstacle remained: little Charles Edward Cotton. Mary, citing financial hardship, attempted to surrender the child to a workhouse, but the request was denied. Just a few days later, young Charles also met a mysterious end, bidding a final farewell to this world. This very death became the biggest mistake in Mary Ann Cotton's supposedly perfect plan. Official Thomas Riley, suspicious of the child's sudden departure, reported the situation to the doctor. When Dr. Kilburn sent the remains from the boy's stomach to an advanced laboratory, the truth emerged in all its naked horror. Arsenic. Following a massive investigation, it was estimated that Mary had poisoned and murdered as many as 21 people over the last 20 years. As the graves of her victims were opened and autopsies performed, every single body revealed heavy traces of the same silent killer. Arsenic. The trial, which began in March 1873, lasted a mere 3 days. Mary Ann Cotton was sentenced to death for her savage and calculated crimes. Though she pleaded and begged for mercy in the courtroom, there was no forgiveness for such a monster. On March 24th, 1873, England's most horrific mother drew her final breath, swinging from the gallows. We have reached the end of this video. See you in the next dark chapter of the Serial Killer Files. I am Redbeard. Take great care of yourselves.